So central to the idea of all these lean startups is that there's a lot of technology. And to make that technology work, you have to work with engineers who are going to build it. And one of the ideas we had here was to try and talk about how do you get engineers on board with building things in a lean way, and how do you sort of engage them so that they're full participants in the process as opposed to just people who are trying to build things in an old agile way and not understanding what the business people are thinking about. We have a couple different things sort of that came up of different tips on sort of how to convince your engineers to join it. The first one, maybe you guys could talk about is sort of the role of prototyping and thinking about the MVP.
Yeah, sure. So my role at BloomBoard is kind of an experiment right now. It's a hybrid of UX, user experience, and product. By trade, I am a designer. And one thing that we've strived to do is validate as many assumptions as possible ahead of time using paper prototypes, using click-throughs, basically anything that we can put up on the wall, anything that we can get in front of customers, testing out everything from crazy ideas all the way down to the smallest thing that we can do before we're building code. And that's been incredibly helpful for us. We've abandoned a lot of unfruitful avenues, and I have been wrong more times than I can count on something that I was just set on. I knew our customers were going to love it. I thought it was a brilliant design, and it failed miserably. And one mantra that we have just kind of come up with in the company based on this experience is our opinions don't matter. The CEO says it all the time. My opinion doesn't matter. And my opinion doesn't matter too, which is kind of hard to accept as a designer, but it's yielding better results for us.
One of the things that we found was that when I arrived at Change.org about a year ago, we already had a culture of testing and experimentation. But we noticed that it was taking us a very long time to run our experiments. And so we began to do investigation into why that was. And the thing that we found was that the engineers, who were all incredible engineers and very well versed in Agile and TDD, were still building experimental models that we were going to run in production with the very sort of heavy, perfect engineering process that they would use for any code. And so we really had to figure out a way to change their thinking about it so that they were willing to run a little quicker, try things on smaller segments of users, and kind of cut some corners, essentially, because every feature that we deployed that hadn't been run in front of actual customers was a bet. And so that was a real struggle for the engineers to adapt to, and that's something that we're doing pretty well now, but it took a long time to kind of relearn that. And the approach that we took was basically to divide into two separate types of work. So we had our unvalidated hypotheses that the goal was actually to build something as quickly as possible. So our metric there would be essentially cycle time for validated learning to prove to prove or disprove the hypothesis as quickly as possible. And the other type of work were things that had been validated that we were going to build, sort of more robustly. And as long as we were clear at the outset in every sort of kickoff of a project which type of work it was, is this an experiment, or is this more robust sort of scalability and feature development? Then the engineers that gave them a goal to head towards, and that actually really cleared up a lot of confusion. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a matter of convincing the engineers that these are not things that code will last forever, but these are attempts to learn how to solve the problem. One of the other places that you hear coming up all the time is sort of, what are your metrics? What data are you collecting? And developers love to collect data, but one of the things that is interesting to see is you need to have, building from the start, the idea that you're collecting data, that you're pulling in all these metrics, you're integrating, mixed panel or KISS metrics from day one, just like you're doing testing. I don't know if you guys had an experience with getting developers to collect the metrics.
Yeah, I think for us, it was more a matter of trying to do it quickly and cheaply. So we were struggling with a lot of build your own syndrome. So when I arrived, we had actually spent several attempts at building very sophisticated metrics systems. And it took us a while to kind of realize that that was a big waste of time and money, and that there were wonderful tools like Mixpanel out there. And so, several months ago, we scrapped a whole sort of measurement system that we had built and started moving to Mixpanel, and we experienced a lot of improved speed in getting useful information into the development process after that. So it's one of those examples of being able to sort of look at your baby and realize that it's ugly and you need something better. So we threw it away.
Yeah. So we also suffered from the build your own syndrome. I'm happy to say that we finally did build our own, but in retrospect, I'm not sure it was the right decision. We're at the point now where we just now finished our tracking system, and we have our metrics, but it took about 3 months, which was way longer than we expected going into it. It seemed like it was going to be really easy. It kind of snowballed. It became its own thing that we didn't really feel like we had much control over until it was done. So we're happy to be through it. At the beginning, we talked about Mixpanel. We talked about KISS metrics. There's so many solutions out there. Each one seemed like it could almost work. But I think one of the fears that we had that prevented us from going with one of those is that none of them seemed like a perfect match. I feel like our engineering team was a little hesitant to dip their toes in the water and just give it a try, with the risk that we would have to, go back and try another one. When is it going to end? So definitely, yeah, that definitely resonates with us.
Just like there's this phrase that you should be embarrassed about the design and the product that you launch and you get out there, your developers should be a little bit embarrassed about the quality of code, especially in these MVPs and these first versions, because you're doing it to learn, you're doing it to adjust and move forward, and not so much doing it to expect this code to be running in 10 years.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And the thing that was really difficult for us is that our engineers had all been burned before, in the sense that they had been told, like, look, we want to do something really quick and dirty and get it up on production and test it in a small segment. And then in the rush, if the idea, the hypothesis is validated, then suddenly there's this rush to build on top of it. And so, I really, as director, I had to promise them that, like, okay, we're going to time box this experiment, you build it as quickly as possible, and we are throwing this code away. Like, don't get attached to it. Do only whatever testing is necessary to make sure that your validation is working. But this is getting deleted after we get our results, and then you can have an opportunity to sort of re-architect it if we're really going to move in that direction. So that was I had to assure them several times. I still, on a daily basis, have to kind of give them assurance that this experiment really is just an experiment, and we're not going to push you to kind of like put your sort of bad or scrappy code into long-term use.
It's interesting how effective telling people that they have a limited amount of time or resources is for pushing developers to get forward. In the Django and Rails community, you have Django Dash and Nose Knockout and Rails Rumble, all these 48-hour projects where people build real products. And they pull it off because that's the limit of how much time they have. And so telling people you have to remove things, you don't have the space to do it right, you have to make it work, is an incredibly effective tactic.
Yeah, we recently even went so far as to hire a freelance developer outside of our company and give him only 2 weeks to ensure and promise that the code was going to be throwaway. And even then, at the end of the 2 weeks, which just recently finished, we were still hearing, well, maybe we can build on top. We could use some of it, can't we? So the temptation always seems to be there.
Yeah, and another constraint is around the concept as well. So you have like the time and the resources constraint, but also like when you start things off saying like, look, this is an experiment, we've got something that we think this is going to work, or we think that users will take this behavior, that tends to focus people on the goal. And if you don't have that goal, they'll focus on whatever they're comfortable focusing on. So it's really important to conceptually box it as well, and that's another constraint that can keep people kind of on the track to just prove or disprove the hypothesis.
Another area I think is super important is figuring out how to remove as much as possible the divide between the engineering team and the product team and the rest of the company. And my experience back at Odeo and the sort of initial prototypes of Twitter, everybody in the company had a copy of the full site running. Everybody had Ruby on Rails running on their laptops. Everyone had commit access. Everyone could edit HTML. Now, we had a fairly technical group of business people. But to me, it's really important to say that anyone can get in there and edit pages. Now, today we have better tools such as Optimizely and other stuff, but that idea that not just engineers can make changes.
You guys doing that?
We're definitely not there yet. I dream of a day when that can happen, though. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have, sort of non-technical people in the company that have access to that can code and then run their own queries and experiment on things. I wouldn't say that I would be happy if everyone at our company was committing to production, but yeah, I think for us there's also a parallel in design as well. So we try to have that open, collaborative. Anyone also can ideate on a particular idea, and so it's important to have your product managers and your designers and your engineers really kind of roped into a room and given a problem to solve, and that's the model that we've been experimenting with, and it still has its rough edges, but I think that there's several different types of that kind of mentality of that.
Sure, it's just a matter of incorporating everybody in the process,
Yeah.
opposed to the engineering team is off at some remote office that and even if you're remote, you're not doing regular calls, you're not having everybody communicate back and forth and exposing it all.
One thing we definitely try to do is make sure that our engineers are actually connected to the customers. They have lunch with our customers. They are invited to any kind of usability session or phone call. The door is completely open. There are some UX practitioners who don't necessarily believe in this, but I do it anyway, for better or for worse. Anytime I talk to a customer, I will send that raw data, that raw information out to the team for them to use as they wish. The ideas and innovation don't come from just one person. So the more they can have that seed in the back of their mind while they're making decisions, because they make decisions all the time, continually, it benefits everyone.
Yeah, we all use our product as well. So our platform is a petition platform, so we're constantly creating petitions to ourselves or sharing them, or sometimes we have sort of funny internal ones like order lunch on Fridays, and we'll all petition the CTO to get us lunch and stuff like that. So, but we're familiar with the product as well, and then we also do make an effort to do user interviews and all kinds of getting out of the building type of stuff as well. So
The last technique that I thought was really useful is when you come up with a new feature, a new thing that's going to get built, asking the developers if they can fake it. Asking them what if you didn't actually write so much code on the back end? What if you just added some filters on the front end that changed what the design looked like, or you're going to split your site up into multiple domains, but what if you kept the code base the same? What if you didn't do the real hard work, but just made it appear as if you made all these changes? And that pushes developers to this idea of how do you get to testing and trying things out? Because if you say split the site up into multiple domains, they're like, okay, what code goes in what repository?
Right. Yeah, that's been a tough one for us, but we've definitely been experimenting with the idea of okay, can we just do a version of this as a static page and just have people, bounce on it and then pass them into the main experience and stuff? And it's been a little bit the engineers have definitely said, whoa, I'm not going to do anything kind of shoddy and put it out there, but we've done some faking it for sure and gotten great data from that as well. Yeah.
Ask them about just using WordPress instead of coding something.
They'd be horrified, but they'd try it.
Yeah, but it's an incredibly effective tool of what if we didn't write software?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
We have not gotten there yet. We're not there. We're just not there, period. We've in education, so what we've tried to do instead is work with the administrator level and fake it through a lot of manual offline process. We do a lot of faking it through spreadsheets.
Well, that's exactly that, faking it. So how do you make the engineering work so that you can serve the agile needs and the lean needs? I think that's it. I think we're wrapping up here. But engineers want to be lean. They want to make it work. And the trick is how to engage them in the process and maybe not let them run it, but know what's happening and collaborate. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.